Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this radio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about and I've done a video on this a few days ago, but talk about the Tyre Nichols case in the United States. For those of you who maybe not across it, a black man that allegedly was driving erratically and then refused the police command to stop was intercepted by police and was beaten rather badly and later on died of his injuries in an encounter with 5 black police officers in the United States. And there were supposed to be sort of subsequent riots that would occur, but they're fairly mooted compared to the George Floyd incident, which happened, a couple of years or so earlier. Now, there are quite a few questions that remain about the Tyre Nichols case, which seem to be oddly obscure, and there don't seem to really be many people asking these essential questions. Now, based on the video footage, excuse me, when the police caught up with Mr. Nichols in his car, they were in the police were in a very agitated state, consistent with a belief that Mr. Nichols was defying them and openly defying them and defying lawful commands of the police. So that seems to come across there. Now, it could be a case of mistaken identity. Maybe they thought Mr. Nichols was someone else that had committed some crimes or something like that. So we've got a claim here that Mr. Nichols has no previous interaction with police. Well, that's certainly the information that's doing the rounds. So for some reason, a number of black police officers pull over a black man in a black neighborhood and immediately, aggressively start mistreating him. Now, any citizen's got basic legal rights, which even on rudimentary training, police would be advised to adhere to. But for some reason, these police all of them are very agitated and as if they're responding to someone who's been giving them trouble. So how did that happen? Because people don't treat other people like that. You just don't arbitrarily grab somebody and start beating them up or treating them with maximum aggression. Just some rando bystander or someone driving by. You just don't do that. So clearly there's something that be it justified or not, that caused those police officers to behave with that level of aggression, and it seemed as if they wanted to, based on observing the footage, they wanted to severely punish Mr. Nichols for what they perceived were his misdeeds. Now, I've watched the video a few times, and there are claims that Mr. Nichols was complying with the police orders. I don't accept that. The police said, get on the ground, lie on your stomach face down. And Mr. Nichols didn't do that. He got sort of on the ground, kind of crouched, and then he lay on his side, looking up and so on. So they kept repeating, on your face, stomach on the ground, you do it. And Mr. Nichols didn't do that. Now, whether that's enough to beat someone with is hard to accept. But why they didn't just put Mr. Nichols in cuffs and then say, okay, you're being arrested for the following reasons, and you're being taken to the police cells, and you'll be detained there until you appear before a judge in the morning or the next day or whatever it is. That would have been more than sufficient if indeed Mr. Nichols had committed some sort of crime that they could clearly and concisely charge him with. But that wasn't what was happening. They again, their level of aggression was out of all proportion to what would have been a rando stop by someone they didn't know or had never heard of or had never committed any crime. Now, if indeed Mr. Nichols had no criminal past, then they could have run a check, which wouldn't have been hard to do, and could have said, well, this guy's got no criminal history. Then there's hardly he's not like he's a career criminal that has, say, a history of violent crime or having fights with police or something like that. Then you could say, well, there may be some sort of cause for aggression, not the level of aggression we saw, incidentally, but some sort of aggressive type policing action. So nothing seems to fit here. This idea that it was racism, of course, is utterly absurd and can be dismissed out of hand. Now look at Mr. Nichols' behaviour. He wasn't complying with the police orders, in my view, or was part complying but not fully complying. And this was clearly agitating the police. Now, if you're anybody and you can see the police being agitated and you kind of only half sort of do what they're telling you to do, and you can see this is agitating them, any person would think, well, gee whiz, let's try and diffuse the situation here. I'll do exactly what they tell me to do, and that will go some way towards diffusing the situation. But Mr. Nichols didn't do that. So I think there's a contributing factor there. Again, not enough to justify the kicking and all that sort of stuff. But nonetheless, Mr. Nichols didn't take that action, which would have added to diffusing the situation. And I've noticed that frequently with issues with black people being arrested, is that they don't comply with the police instructions, including the George Floyd incident, by the way. And this seems to be a key thing that causes the matter to escalate. Now, the police, being professionals, should be satisfied with arresting somebody and putting them in a prison cell. It's for a judge to decide. It's not for the police to decide on the street about arbitrary justice or beating people up or some sort of punitive on-the-spot measures. That's not the role of the police. Their job is to arrest people they believe have committed a crime, recognising the individual's rights, and they can detain them according to the law. And then it's a matter for the Department of Prosecutions and of course a court of law, a judge in a court of law, to decide what penalties, if any, need to be applied. And the police need to understand their role there, and they didn't fulfil that, in my view, didn't fulfil that role in the matter of Mr. Nichols. Now, when Mr. Nichols ran off, which was kind of understandable in one way, but I believe Mr. Nichols contributed to his own situation there by not fully complying with the police, and they were at an aggressive point where any non-compliance was viewed as unacceptable defiance, that they should get an even more aggressive response. That was the cycle that the matter was in. And then Mr. Nichols ran off, which again, a lot of black suspects do, be they being aggressively treated or not. So Mr. Nichols ran off, and this was bound to attract an even more aggressive response again, which it did. So Mr. Nichols again didn't help his own situation by running off like that. Now, I don't know what sort of mental condition Mr. Nichols was in, or when he was taking drugs for something. I don't know, but it's a strange thing that a man of his age should call out in a loud voice, "Mom, mum, mum," or "mom," as they do in America. Now that I can't think of anyone that I know of, if they were getting at that age, maybe 10 years old or something, or if their mother was just around the corner or next to them, they would call out. But even then, you got 5 dudes with guns. Did you call your mother into that sort of dangerous situation? I don't know. That just seems odd to me. So I don't know about Mr. Nichols' mental condition. Maybe he'd received a blow to the head and he was delirious or something at that point. I don't know. But that doesn't seem to make much sense. Now, coming back to the police all know that this is being recorded on body cam, and the officers doing, behaving this way, and they must know there's cams all over the city, and yet they continue to behave with gross illegality, in my view, and continue to do so while being filmed on camera doing it. that's definitely a lack of forethought. That's hardly the mark of a professional there. So um, uh, I don't understand that the you know the training, as in, are they trained to respect the rights of the citizen, and so on. So now there are other things that come up, that the police were part of a special unit, and they were working in the most crime infested areas of the city, and their job was to disrupt criminal activity. Now, I accept that, if they're dealing with career criminals who are murderers, and who have a history of having shootouts with police, or those sorts of things, then I accept that the policing would be quite aggressive. There's You're dealing with the absolute organised crime gangsters, and so I accept that the policing would need to be aggressive. Not to the point of kicking someone to death, by the way, but aggressive policing, and so that's been put forward as a reason that they were aggressively policing, and just happened to accidentally come across someone who had no criminal record, and for no reason decided to beat them to death. I don't accept that. There's something else going on here that we're not being told, or is yet to be brought into evidence. I'll add something. I know or knew, I haven't seen him for some years now. I knew a detective sergeant in the police, and I saw him in when he was assigned to a police station in quite an affluent area where there's almost no crime, and in an area where there were drug gang shootouts in the street, and beatings and muggings and murders and all sorts of things. So a completely different area, and seeing his behaviour in the two different areas. Now, when he was policing in the area where the gangs and the shootouts were occurring, I could see the tension in there because he often did night shift, because he got they got more pay for doing night shift or something, and so he volunteered a lot for doing night shift. Was when most of the criminality, not all of it, but most of it took place, and so he was constantly walking around the streets and he had firearms, and they had sort of policemen with body armor sort of walking around, and he'd been in that sort of situation for some time, where people are pulling out guns and trying to shoot you, pulling out knives, where physical struggles with criminals almost every night are the norm, where you're almost in a state of permanent siege. Any second someone's going to come out and try and shoot you. Every person you stop for a traffic infringement is going to have a gun. So as they're patrolling around, they're pulling over cars that maybe their registration papers are not in order, or something like that. And so when they're already on a super high state of alert that the person's going to pull a gun, or try and run them down in the car, or something like that. And so and you could see the stress and the tension on the guy's face, on his movements, the jumpiness, the jitteriness of having to live or work, in this case, under that sort of stress and pressure, that people are out there trying to kill you. Everyone you interact with is either trying to kill you or telling you lies, or something like that. So it's not an easy job being a police officer there. And what they tended to do, as far as I could tell, the police was, they tended to put the most experienced officers in charge there, and they would rotate the junior officers, the beginner officers in there, but on a ratio 4 experienced officers to every 1 inexperienced officer. A new officer still has to learn their job and be able to police in the difficult high crime areas. Now, I then saw him when he was assigned to quite an affluent area where the most serious crimes were where neighbours accuse each other of cutting down their roses without permission or something like that. There was almost no crime, or there'd be break-ins of people, house break-ins of people coming from the poor areas or the crime-ridden areas into this area, drug addicts, that sort of thing. And so those were the he said, "Did you have to deal with any violent crime?" No, there were 2 75-year-old neighbours who were having a fight over the roses in the garden, that sort of thing. He said, other than that, there's no organised crime, no shootings, no knifings, no bashings. It's all very low-level stuff. And you could see the difference in him. He was almost contemptuous of the people in the rich areas or the well-to-do areas, because their concept of criminality and this sort of thing, he said, they've got no idea what crime really is. They think spitting on the sidewalk should be an imprisonable offence, whereas previously he was dealing with people, gun battles in the main street and that sort of stuff. So he was, but you see the difference in him. In the affluent area, no one's trying to shoot him, no one's trying to kill him. The lies he gets are almost low-level lies about magnitude rather than did something happen or not happen. Everyone's registration papers that are in order, and there may be a couple of kids in the shopping centre car parking lot that have a little drag race. It's that extent. That's the height of the criminality in those areas. So that was a difference. But the difference in him as a person, the jitteriness was gone. He was quite relaxed. The next day was predictable. No one was going to try and kill him and that sort of thing. And the difference in him was quite immense. So if you look at any police officer that's working in a high crime area where there is a lot of murder and shootouts and knifings and killings and whatnot, and they're working in an area like that, then you would imagine they'd be operating under considerable stress. And I think this is why most police forces tend to put their more experienced officers in those areas, or rotate them around, of course, but have a majority of experienced officers. Now, we see in the case of this incident with Mr. Nichols here in the United States that the officers were not experienced. They were not high quality hires. They were affirmative action hires and things like that. So it's dangerous when you put sort of, in my view, and assuming that this is borne out by any investigation, where you put low IQ, minimally trained officers out into a high crime area where they are likely to get shot at or stabbed or something like that, and they're living and working under that tension, that they're likely to snap at some point and behave illegally. Let's call it what it is: behave illegally. And I think that's probably a case here. So we need to find out why were the police so agitated, incredibly agitated, when they pulled Mr. Nichols over and dragged him out of the car, and what was the causes and reasons, if any, and then look at why did such low quality people get hired and been put into very dangerous situations where they're most likely to panic and overreact. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.